Oh, I'm practicing on YouTube here. It says I can record. What I had done before actually was downloaded some of them, and I can't find a place to do that yet. Well, this is Pop's going on about chainsaw stuff, at least today. We had a neighbor that's been, over the last probably 5 years, has been cutting down a couple of huge oak trees they had out front. One wasn't a monstrosity, but it was big, and this one they cut down today was right on the borderline of monstrosity. She was tagging up in the feet, probably up height wise, in the feet category, about 80. The diameter at the bottom, I'm going to guess in the neighborhood of 30, 32 inches, 30 something. It was big. Big girl. And, oh, I know it's not like birch trees where you got male and female. But anyway, I'm in the back here listening to this saw RPM going up and down, up and down. I mean, it was just like the guy was doing one of these all the way through it. And he's in my category, my age category. Boomer. I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know how to run a saw better than that. He's cutting a notch and it just constant. What the world's going on here? Well, I figured if anybody watches this, where it looks like 6 people are subscribers, so I thought, why not? Let's see if we can develop something here on YouTube. And no, I don't have the right equipment to go live, so we're going to record everything here. Now, the funny thing is, it's a good size saw. I'm guessing it looked like he had about a 30-inch bar, maybe smaller. Well, I think steel does 28 to 32, so it's someplace in that category, 30 plus or minus. And it looked like he was running an MS 660 size saw, 650, somewhere in there. Now, I've run a 650 with a 28-inch bar, and it just 24-inch bar was, how can I describe it? It was like mowing the lawn with a 150 horse tractor. It was just that kind of thing. Whoop-de-flip and do. Butter, Well, the one was a 650, the other was a 650 Magnum. That rock and rolled, let me tell you. So I'm listening to him go at it out there, and it sounded like he was having trouble even cutting, because he brought it down to just a few limbs in the main trunk. And it sounded like he was struggling a little bit to cut the limbs, and he kept right on cutting. And I'm looking, there's slices in the trunk, and what's happening here? And he's dogging. Now, when your RPM's going up and down like you're jerking the handle, like it's biting in and gets so low that you pull it back out, kind of deal, where it's cutting hard and then not, hard, cut, not. There's 3 things that cause them to, I think, what did I come up with before? A total list of about 5 things that will cause your saw to do that. 5 individual problems. And the first one is the operator. The operator doesn't have it set up to smoothly walk the saw through. At the end, I'll tell you why it's important to try and be as smooth as you can. It's not always possible, but there's a reason for it. So he's just jamming it in there. There might be a fairly new chain, especially if it's a steel chain. They tend to pull hard. And your professional Oregon chains, I've had 1 or 2, they tend to cut very similar to the steel. None of the others do, but the professional does. That's on Oregon. Steel almost always has a good pull to it. Except for your little saws there with a small kerf 1/4-inch pico. So first is operator causing the RPM and the load to go up and down drastically like that. The next one is, in his case, the saw was also running lean. So when it's lean, it sounds great, and then you hit the wood, there's not enough fuel there for the heat that's being developed. So if there's not the fuel there in the air to expand, it's hot, it's burnt, that's it. In other words, if you have a chainsaw with an 1.5-inch power stroke before the exhaust port opens, well, that means that the charge that's in there has expanded completely before that piston ever reaches. Just poof, it's gone. And the other part is, if it's too lean, it never fully burns. So it's just like another puff. That's it. That's a quick puff, and then when the exhaust opens up, it finishes burning on the way out. It doesn't get that proper burn time to give it its full expansion before the piston hits the exhaust port. So that's another one. It's running too lean, so you got a problem there. No, I'm not going into what the lean condition can do to the saw. This is just about the power struggle up and down. What's the next one? Well, the lean condition might have several causes. Usually you could be low on fuel, your fuel filter, you got a leak in the line, you got a problem with your pulse connection to the carburetor plugged, all of that stuff could be causing that problem. Then you get into the engine, there could be an air leak, etc., etc. Now that we've run too lean, now we start getting into the chain. If the rakers have been hogged down too far, even with a sharp chain, it will cause trouble where you move it into the wood and it pulls itself in deeply. I mean, if you get your raker too low below the tooth, that cutting edge, that ramp on that tooth will hit hard enough that it will pull itself into the wood and force the raker in there. So it'll gain another 5 to 10 thousandths a cut just from force, especially if you're giving it a jam a little bit or you can't hold it back and cut smoothly. So the RPM will be howling away, and then all of a sudden, yeah, it's ugly. What's the other one? The next one is boink. The next one is your rakers are adjusted properly, but your teeth are dull. That's another one that causes a real problem. It goes into the wood, but it starts pulling harder than maybe the saw has a. Yeah, don't mind me, I'm checking my mail and such. Doesn't have the power to pull it through because when it hits, the rakers are proper, it's trying to cut, and it's having a very hard time doing it, especially if you have a standard chain with all your teeth there. Because then they hit together, and together, where one tooth might not do much, on a larger piece of wood like this is, and your full bar's in there, that's a tremendous amount of power to pull all those dull teeth through there. That's why quite often, usually once they pass 24 inches, you start running skip chains, even on the bigger saws with more power, just for that. And the other idea is the skip chain, the teeth are twice as far apart as they would be, but at the same time, there's plenty of space between the teeth for that sawdust as that's traveling through and doing a continuous cut all the way through. That skip tooth chain allows space for the wood chips. So we've got operator, we've got a lean running chainsaw, which may just be adjustments or trouble with the saw. We have a dull chain, and we have poorly adjusted rakers. Now those are your main things that cause that problem. I said 5 before, but one of them is escaping me and I can't. The other possibility is the fifth one that I didn't cover before, is your bar has a problem. Either the bar has a pinch, the bar rails are off. Rather than being two parallel rails, they're off a little bit, so when you get into the cut, the chain turns and binds. And not just binding in the bar, it's binding in the wood as well, because now it's not just cutting, it's starting to twist at that spot, and then when it hits the better part of the bar, it's trying to rock back up in there, and it's taking a swipe at the wood, one going down and the other coming back up. So it pulls much harder. And you're bent, you're pinched, all that adds up into it. Because if it's bent, you know what it's doing. If it's twisted, the chain's it's a mess. So those are the things I think of with that. Now, there's the other one, number 6, which is an oddball. Has nothing to do with the saw, really. If your saw, everything is perfect, there is another one that's rare, but it does happen, because I have that happen in aspen wood once in a while. If aspen has been frozen and you start cutting into it, it doesn't cut clean, and all these little fibers are hanging out there. And sometimes they get fairly long, especially in the winter. And they'll pinch your chain and bar. You'll think there's a problem. You'll go in there and it'll start dogging. What do? You pull your saw out, And then just give it a gentle twist and walk it back in. Bring it back out. Give it a gentle twist and walk back in. And be careful with it. And you open your kerf up, and now you can hit and keep on going until you have to do it again. So there are 5 things, or even 6 at this point, that can cause that problem. Now in this case, the type of oak tree it was hard enough. There was a smooth cut, so there was no expansion. It's not frozen wood because of the temperature overnight got into the 30s, but during the day it's been 60s and 70s. So that problem doesn't exist. It was a dry tree, which you can see by the way he had to cut the thing. Once you got it cut off and you look in there, the wood was starting to look like it was on its way out. So it was a dry tree, plus this has been dry weather. So it adds up. Occasionally, sometimes you get bark that interferes. Again, in this case, that's not it. So it added up to any one of the others. The saw is running lean. The operator has not been operating it properly. And the chain is either needs to be a skip tooth and isn't, and or it's dull and proper raker adjustment. So those are the things that can really cause a lot of trouble with those. A lot of guys with the bigger saws like to run what they call a full house chain, which means there's teeth all over that mongrel. But then where do the wood chips go? The skip tooth chain has a purpose, and a very good purpose. In fact, I wanted to run a 24-inch bar on my MS311, which is 3.6 cubes. Nowhere, almost half of what that guy has, or a little more than half of what he has. He was running probably 6.5. Well, 3.6, I'm running up equivalent. If I doubled it, would be 7.2, obviously. And what did I do with the 24-inch bar is considered maximum for the saw. Well, I didn't want to struggle, and I was cutting some interesting wood, maple in particular, and I thought I'll get a skip tooth. And it runs it beautifully. Why? Skip tooth you need in your larger wood. So there's fewer teeth cutting at the same time, but you're getting the same job done. And the engine can run at a higher RPM and make up for the missing teeth. It's well worth it, especially in this case with an underpowered saw. So anyway, there you go. Those are the things that you can do to make life more interesting. Those are the things to watch out for. And again, if you're certain like I was, where the guy revs the saw up and then releases the trigger, and it doesn't just come down, it sounds like it's taken a long time to ramp down, well, then your saw is too lean. And a part of that is when it's too lean coming down, that it's too lean on the idle side. And the idle handles up into the mid-range. So if your saw starts to lug down and there's a little transfer, where more of your fuel is coming from the idle circuit than the high circuit, because the airflow is slowing down, it's important that both adjustments are proper. Anyway, well, someone had said it before. One of the ways to know you're too lean, I can't remember who it was that said this too. It could have been Aaron Lynch. The heck's the name of the other guy? I think it was Buck and Billy Ray was another one. Gordy, West Coast Saw. Gordy had said it when he was talking about his adjustments. So you can go to any one of those guys and they'll tell you how to properly adjust a saw. There's a third one that does the chainsaw modifications. I can't remember the kid's name, and he's real good at it too. But he's more of the hands-on internal mechanism. Aaron Lynch is nuts. He likes to go out in the woods. He'll beat his saw to death after he's got through with it. It's one of those things where I'm going to break it in or break it. Buck and Billy Ray, he's out there finessing. He said, is it going to do this? Is it going to do that? Well, and Billy's messing for that last little bit that he might get. And then you get to Gordy. Gordy's a logger that works on chainsaws. So adjustments, that's his mainstay. He knows what he's doing. And Jake out there, he's learning from Gordy. That's Jake, guilty of treason. But listen to those guys about all of, I think Aaron, Buck and Billy, and Gordy all have some type of video on how to properly adjust your saws. What's the name of the other one? There's 2 other guys. Iron Man, Tin Man, and Iron Man, I think. Iron Horse. Tin Man, Iron Horse, Buck and Billy Ray, Gordy, and Aaron Lynch. Gordy at West Coast Saw. Those guys will give you, pick one. I've listened to them all. They're good. They know what they're doing. Now, if you listen to Buck and Billy Ray on the 500i and how he didn't like the way it worked, but then started listening to people how it would properly work, and listen to his 500i. Actually, you can listen to his new limbing saw, their little 200 or 201T. Same idea. Those will give you an idea, listening to them, how you're supposed to have your carbureted saw adjusted. The one, I think his limbing saw, the top handle is M-tronic, I believe, but the 500i is totally fuel injected. But if you listen to the saws, how they operate, both saws will give you an idea from listening how to properly adjust your carbureted saw. You always want a little blubber on the top end, always. You never want it to run smooth, lean all the time, ever. In fact, most of the carbureted saws need to be adjusted back, so occasionally you might hear a little lean burp. They should four-stroke, as we used to call it, or blubber. Some of our older saws, like the 041 Steels, 051s, 075, 076s, the lay-down, long-stroke, big puppies, we used to actually double blubber. Bring the thing up, it'd start to four-stroke, and then double that as well, back and forth. Why? We needed to control the RPM, and when you buried that saw in the wood, smooth, and it had a roar to it because it was long stroke. Let me tell you, like the Pioneers, you get used to some of those, and Pioneers are bigger bore stroke, but laying down they're able to have a long stroke. So you listen to the Pioneers, the 041 Steels, the 051s and those that lay down long, even the 090s and 070s, 08S, 07S, a lot of those saws had a nice long stroke, and you had to double blubber them to keep the RPM down to 11,000. You wanted it below 12, 11, 11.5. So, but listen to that on the modern saws. Listen to Buck and Billy's and some of the others, how they adjust their saws, and you will hear a perfect tone out of both the M-tronic and the I series and fuel injected. Well, there you go. That's 17 minutes worth of information that probably most of you won't even hear and don't care. This is Pops of Pops Wrench 2 fame, or infamous, and Howard's Repair Service in Appalachian, New York. You folks be good and have a good day.